That's unity. There it is. We could end it right there, but then I would have all these notes with nothing to do with. So our topic this month is Cherish the Human Family. And our talk title today is Unity. And oftentimes we really misunderstand unity. We see it as sameness, we see it as doing the same thing, we see it as believing the same thing. Not so much. The world is in unity. Truth be told, unity is all there really is. Because in one, it by definition kind of has to be unified with itself, right? For there to be separation would require two. And the challenge is that everything we see in this human realm sure looks like separation because it's different. Ernest Holmes says this: everything that lives proclaims the glory of God. Every person who exists manifests the life of God. There is one spirit in which we live, one mind by which we think, one body of which we are a part, one light that lighteth every person's pathway. The only way that I was able to grasp this is to relate it to my physical body. We all start out as one tiny little cell. And that one cell replicates itself identically, right? And then all of a sudden, there is this moment, and it makes me laugh because we like explaining things in science, and we can't explain this one. There is just this moment where all of a sudden, this ball of identical cells knows to differentiate. And some cells become arms, and some cells become legs, and some cells become livers. And no one quite can explain how that happens. So when I think about this physical structure as a microcosm of the universal macrocosm, I begin to understand unity at a whole different level. That I am a differentiated cell in the body of Creator, as are you. Imagine that for just a minute. That this thing that you think is individual and separate is really a cell in the body of the infinite. Now that, even saying it, I have goosebumps. That's pretty amazing if you think about it. Because we spend a whole lot of our time trying to find ourselves as if we're lost. I don't know about any of you, but all I need is a mirror, and there I am. We're never lost. But mentally, we play games with ourselves that separate ourselves. Okay? Where have we put Creator? Where have we put Spirit? Because it hasn't gone anywhere. It is everywhere. So there's really, think about it. There's one, it's everywhere present. Where's it going to go? Right? There's no place for the divine to go to. We separate ourselves, and then without any intention and very unconsciously, we blame it on the divine. Every time we say, I'm looking for God, or I'm looking for Spirit, that puts the leaving on it. It didn't go anywhere. You're right there. And Spirit is right where you are. It is you, as you. That's the part that seems the hardest for us to wrap our little human brains around, is that We are so intentional. I want you to get this. You are so intentional, so on purpose, that whatever this thing is that created all of life, it wanted to experience itself as you. Now, if that doesn't get you excited about breathing, I'm not sure I can help. Creation itself wants to know its life as you. That's why you're here. Now, here's the even better news. You can't mess it up. You can't. Because the fact that you're here gives the divine exactly what it wanted, an experience of itself as you. No way to fail. What we create is our own discontent when we separate. That which created us doesn't even know we've done it, because it's just busy being us, experiencing itself as us. It is a mental process, a brain process. And part of the challenge is understanding the difference between mind and brain. Okay. Mind is the infinite. I feel it right here. My brain is a computer hard drive up here that processes information in this human realm. And that's where I separate myself. That's where I separate myself. And it's not hard. I mean, we all came from different places today. Lends itself to the idea of separation. Right? Nobody was in the shower with me this morning. Lends itself to separation. And yet, we're never separate. And this is the part where these teachings probably take me the deepest. Because when I really lean into the unity, to this absolute connectedness, then I get that everything I think, say, and do impacts you. It impacts you. Everything is constantly, if this moves, everything moves. Okay. I went camping Thursday night, Friday night, up 6,663 feet of burr. Snow on the ground. It was the first time I've been camping with snow on the ground. It was very cool. And we all experience things differently. Now, Deborah and I drove up there this past Saturday before, a week ago, when it was pouring down rain. And I'm excited about this coming trip, right? And Deborah's like, so let me see if I get this. You're going to leave a perfectly warm, dry house to drive up here knowing there's probably going to be snow on the ground, that at night it's going to be below freezing, and you're going to do that on purpose? Uh-huh. I don't get it. Sometimes we don't get it. Sometimes we make choices in our own life that we don't get. Yes? I will tell you this. Our biology has our attention, and even that is up for discussion, because at 28 degrees, the need to get up and go to the bathroom in the middle of the night is a whole different conversation with your biology. And suddenly, it's not such an urgent need as it was when there's a warm house. I ain't judging, I'm just saying that perhaps it's our internal conversation that shifts things more than the external. And how often do we separate ourselves because someone doesn't think like me? Or they don't believe like me? And the truth of the matter is, when that happens in our physical body, it shows up as illness. When your liver cells decide to no longer be a liver cell, it shows up as cancer. When any cell decides to mutate, it shows up as cancer. When some part of us is irritated, it shows up as a physiological inflammation. Yes? And just extrapolate that for just a minute in your brain to what's happening on planet Earth today. I think we have some inflammation to heal. Right? We have decided that certain cells in the one shouldn't be functioning. I have actually heard really brilliant, loving people use the phrase, so-and-so is wasting air good people should be breathing. Wow. That we have gone to a place of discontent where we want to eliminate cells in the body of the one because we no longer think they belong. Here's the truth of that statement. First, we have to separate ourselves. We're looking at the person or people or belief systems, but first I had to say, they're not part of my good. They're not part of the divine. There's something else, which means I am operating from a belief in duality, and I have stopped believing in oneness. It's much easier to look at the outside than to bring that back home. Because if I am separating, it's because I believe there's more than one. Because there can be no separation in oneness. You got to have at least two. You got to have at least two. Russell Anthony Gibbs, the author of The Principle of Oneness, says this: choose to love every facet of yourself unconditionally. You are a complex, multi-dimensional being, and loving yourself requires identifying, accepting, and loving all of our seemingly separate parts. This includes your personal self, your broader self, other people. Let me read that again. This includes your personal self and the broader self, other people. Balance of the physical world, nature, activities, concepts, and the collective universe/God. Everything is you. Everything you see that you think is something other than you is a part of you. There is no outside of us. There really isn't. And it's interesting because the universe looks really chaotic sometimes, and sometimes it's hard to see the synchronicity. I've got a couple of videos that I just fascinated me with how to give folks a visual that they can walk away with. So the first one is Newton's cradle. Let me step aside here so you can see this. So the ones in the middle are being impacted, and it creates movement on the other side. And so to think that anything that you do only affects you is a mistake. Okay? Now, scientifically, what's happening in that model is the space in between becomes compressed and acts as an invisible spring to move everything, and then it shows up on the other side. But how often do we fall into the trap of, well, I'm only hurting myself? Okay. A lot of us use that. Or I'm not responsible for what other people feel. Well, that's true and not. Okay. I'm not responsible for how you experience, but I am responsible for how I show up. Okay. I'm responsible for understanding this connectedness that every time I move, it moves your world too. Every time I have a belief that is negative, it impacts your world too. And if we say we want peace, we have to be about the business of being peaceful. This next video may well be the most fascinating thing I have seen in a long time. And I want you to notice how it looks like chaos, but then not. And apparently everything fell apart. Or did it? Because perhaps it's just restructuring itself, perhaps, into something new. And then the something new that we got comfortable with falls apart. Or does it? This is the activity of creation. This constant coming together, apparent chaos, reforming into something totally new over and over and over. Right? This is called a pendulum wave. And I intentionally picked the ones with the billiard balls because, diversity is a thing for me. And it just keeps going. This is what's happening all the time in creation. All the time. Now, you'll notice every one of the balls is different, yet they're operating in sync with one another. Yes? They all have a different length, which means they're oscillating at a different rate, which is how all this happens scientifically. We're all oscillating at a different rate. We each have an individualized vibration, is how it happens. And if we will allow for the chaos, if we will stand in the unity, then we get to come back together over and over and over, creating new and wonderful images of the divine. Just like that. But how often do we get to that point? See, we really like that first little serpentine, and it's like, yeah, I'm loving this, and all of a sudden it goes, and we're like, no! Put it back! And that moment is gone. That expression is tucked away in the experience of the infinite. And the one thing that the infinite can expand is experience of itself. You can't add more infinite to infinite. Can't do it. It's not going to lose anything, not going to gain anything except experience. And so we are constantly changing and moving and creating new patterns that we can see and experience. I invite you to take it here. Neil deGrasse Tyson. Love that guy. We are all connected to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, to the rest of the universe anatomically. There's no escaping it. One is one is one. I will say this, and I'll invite you to take this into our prayer. Nona Brooks, one of the things that I'm doing is bringing forward the women of New Thought that often get unrecognized. Nona Brooks says this in her book, Mysteries. Since unity is the basic principle of universal expression, let us base our living, our thinking, and our doing upon this law. When we live true to basis, when we live true to basis, the hard experiences of the eternal pass away, and our days grow restful, free, and full of joy. That which we experience in the spirit of unity cannot limit us. Let's take this into prayer. And so as I bring my focus to the one, I recognize that it is perfect peace, wholeness, perfection. I recognize that it is absolute love, joy, intelligence, abundance. That it is the singular source of all creation. That it is the singular activity of all creation. So it must be the singular form of all creation. This is the truth of who and what I am, the divine in form, experiencing itself as my life. And what is true of me is true of all. So every physical form of creation is the divine experiencing itself, from the smallest grain of sand to the greatest experience we can imagine, all individualized, no two same experiences alike. And so we simply lean into that multiplicity of unity, where we stop demanding sameness and we lean into the brilliance of multiplicity within the one, where we celebrate our place in that, where we fully embrace that our job is to show the divine a good time. And so we simply lean into that, embracing every messy moment of this thing that we know as life, as humanity, as one another, as feelings, as form, all of it. Seeing it through the eyes of creation itself, embracing it as exactly what it is, the one in form. Grateful to know exactly how this process works. Grateful to know how creation works. Grateful to know that I am never separate from it. And that I am always in community with it. Grateful, grateful, grateful. And so from this gratitude, from this place of hallelujah, I release my word into that activity of the divine that we call law, that only knows yes, and said it before the words were spoken. And so I invite you to join me as we anchor this together by saying, and so it is.